Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us this week on Have You Heard? Armor Animal Health video series. I am Taylor Eckroth, and I am a customer service representative with Armor for the last 3 years now at our Mandan location. Growing up, I lived west of Mandan on a cow-calf operation. When I'm not in the office, my hobbies include riding horses and hanging out with my kiddos, Kinley and Cash and Brinley. We would like to know where you're joining us from today, so please leave a comment in the comment section below. Also, we want to keep this as interactive as possible, so if you have any questions about anything that you want to discuss today, mention it in the comments and we'll make sure to get it answered. Joining me today is Dr. Dan Tracy from Multimin 90. Good afternoon, Dr. Tracy, and thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here.
Good to have you. So before we get started talking about Multimin 90, Dr. Tracy, can you tell the viewers more about yourself?
Sure, technical service veterinarian with Multimin USA. I'm wrapping up or towards the end of my 8th year. Before moving to Multimin, I was a private practitioner, and specialty included dairy, and I also did beef production medicine as well. And I've always been a student of nutrition during that whole time, and certainly during my practice career, I realized where that interrelationship is between the nutrient status of cattle as well as their success.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Dr. Tracy. So to get started, the first question that I have for you is, could you give us a brief overview about what Multimin 90 is?
Sure. It's a prescription injectable trace mineral containing zinc, manganese, selenium, and copper. And by nature of it being an injectable, it's rapidly absorbed. And so as we talk through today, we'll show why that's important. Meaning it's rapidly absorbed. You can change the status of trace mineral status of that cow pretty quickly. A lot of questions I do get is that, can I replace my oral program with it? And the question is no, it's a complementary to a well-balanced oral program.
Thanks for giving us that brief overview. So the next question I have for you is, could you talk about some scenarios where a cow can have a variation in her trace mineral status?
Sure. I kind of bunch these up into challenges, and one of the challenges is normal biology. It happens whether we like it or not. And the other challenges are things that exist in the animal's environment, like antagonism, deficiencies in forages. But we'll go back to the first point. Normal biology happens whether it happens whether we like it or not. Is that transfer of trace mineral that happens prior to calving and late gestation. So milk is not a good source of trace mineral, and a term that we always use a lot is the trace mineral support from the calf ends at birth. And so it's very important that the transfer of trace mineral occurs during gestation, during late gestation. Now, one aspect of that too is that a cow will give and sacrifice of her own levels. In a perfect world, this happens where her trace mineral status is moderately reduced, and she has time to regain her trace mineral levels prior to breeding. But in certain times where she's challenged by intake, challenged by the environment, challenged by environmental conditions, and or stress, that may not occur. So now we start affecting the breeding season, and so those are challenges that happens. And if we flip to the dairy side of things, dairy cow's no different. She does that as well. But the only thing is, she's producing a lot more milk, a lot greater metabolic stress, as you will. But that's a challenge too. And so even a dairy cow in late gestation her intake is reduced as well. Now, affecting both classes of cattle is those things like antagonists. On the beef side of things, they're more subject to their environment. So if you have an area that's deficient in trace mineral, the foragers are just low. And on the flip side of that, we may have antagonists. Now, antagonists include things such as sulfur, molybdenum, iron. There is a requirement for these minerals, but in excess in a ruminant can reduce trace mineral absorption. So where do we find these sulfur? Well, we can find sulfur in water. We can find it in byproduct feeds, such as molasses. And also too molybdenum as well. We can find it in forages as well. And of course, iron, it's in the dirt, right? So cattle that are grazing pick it up. And certainly you can find some high levels in certain areas of the country as well. So on the dairy side of things, those challenges exist. They're in the ration as far as protein supplements. A lot of these byproduct feeds are good feeds. They provide protein and energy, but they also carry a higher level of these elements that can have a negative interaction and reduce absorption of mineral.
Thanks for sharing that. I'd also like to remind our viewers that if you have any questions about anything we have talked about, please feel free to ask them in the comment section below. Dr. Tracy, when should a producer consider using trace mineral supplementation, and what are the potential benefits?
So injectable strategic use, it complements the oral program. So we're going to put it in play where we have better payback to the producer and better benefit to the cow. So on the beef side of things, the beef cow, that late gestation preg check's important because during that time you get a 2-in-1 shot or 2-in-1 benefit. You're addressing that animal, you're addressing that cow status, and you're also ensuring that you have proper fetal development prior to calving. Okay. Certainly we talked about after calving where her levels now have dropped. So utilize it prior to breeding, prior to bull turnout, or prior to a time AI event. And our research shows that we can increase conception rates in cattle that are well supplemented. But certainly in those areas that are challenged, we certainly can make sure their levels are sufficient prior to breeding. On the dairy side of things, we're going to this transition period, making sure that they have sufficient levels. And what we see in the research there is improvement in udder health. So administering in that dry off 30 days prior to calving and 35 days in milk at labeled dose, we see a benefit of reduction in somatic cell count, reduction in subclinical mastitis and clinical mastitis during lactation. And also, too, pretty interesting as well, we saw a significant reduction in stillbirths and the incidence of endometritis in those cows that received it during the dry period. We can't forget about the bulls on the beef side of things.
Right.
Absolutely. And so on the bull development program, utilizing multi-minute weaning, and there again, during the development process, can help benefit as far as improving BSE passing rates in those young bulls that are being developed for resale. But also it's important to realize too, those bulls that are working bulls, so to speak, they're put them in play. We'll kick them out in the pasture and kiss them goodbye and hope they do their job. Certainly 45 days prior to administering Multimin, we can certainly influence and ensure the fertility of those bulls and when we turn them out to pasture.
Thanks for all that information, Dr. Tracy. So since we were on the topic of potential benefits that Multimin 90 brings, I know there is a short clip that is posted on your product's website, savethelung.com, about how this really takes effect in the cattle and how it works. And we are going to play that short clip here for our viewers, and after the video, you can tell us more about what we saw.
Sure.
Bovine respiratory disease costs money. The immune system needs trace minerals to work, but oral trace mineral intake is variable, and stressed and sick animals do not eat. Multimin 90, being an injectable, fast-acting trace mineral supplement, is a solution and bypasses antagonists such as sulfur, iron, and molybdenum in feed and water. Vaccination is a great tool used to prevent severe disease. Once cattle are vaccinated, the cattle actually have to do all the work in processing the vaccine and building the different protection components. Trace minerals are critical for developing an effective immune response that leads to less disease, less treatment costs, and greater average daily gains. The videos show what happens inside the respiratory tract of cattle challenged with BVDV2 and IBR viruses. Non-vaccinated calves. Cattle vaccinated with intranasal vaccine followed by a booster showed less pus. Not as red or inflamed. Same vaccine protocol, just with Multimin 90 added at primer and booster dose, show significantly less pus. Less redness, less inflamed throats, a real difference. Can you afford not to include Multimin 90 in your health program? Multimin 90 is a prescription product. Please talk to your veterinarian about using Multimin 90. For more information on Multimin 90, please visit www.multiminusa.com.
So going back to you, Dr. Tracy, is there anything that you would like to go over that was in the video or explain better to the viewers?
Absolutely. This is an excellent study put together or conducted at the University of Georgia, Roberto Palomares, and it comes on tail end some other immune studies too. One branch of the study work that we contribute to is the immune function and vaccine, especially in calves. One aspect of when we vaccinate animals, that's kind of that normal biology happens whether we like it or not challenge, is that blood levels and liver levels, when I say liver levels, that's storage levels of trace minerals are affected, they drop. Immune system is pulling a lot of trace minerals because these trace minerals are important as far as normal function. And so when we utilize an injectable trace mineral during the same time of vaccine, we provide a readily available source of trace mineral to those animals, and we see an improvement in the vaccine response. And in that challenge data, using intranasals at the primary and the booster, and I do want to say that it was a primary intranasal, and it was either boosted with an intranasal or parenterally administered vaccine. Even the intranasal also received a monovalent BVD, so they were all covered as far as utilizing our vaccine. The only difference was in the treatment group, it was Multimin 90, and then 49 days later they were challenged. So that's a big jump. And then they were then challenged with BVD and IVR. So you saw the reduction in damage to the respiratory tract in those calves, further demonstrating that we see an improvement in immune response. But going one step further, what does that result in a challenge? Now, our experimental challenge is the worst case scenario. You're introducing viruses to those calves in a way that's pretty effective in creating infection. So even in the face of that experimental infection, we saw a reduction in damage to the respiratory tract in those calves when utilized Multimin at the same time as vaccine.
Thanks for sharing that with us. So we did have some great questions that came about. One of the questions that we have is from Joe. His question is, do I need to worry about my cows getting too much selenium?
So too much of a good thing is, in certain parts of the U.S., especially in been reports, especially in the Dakotas, where selenium can be too high and the forage is too high in the environment. And in that situation, some producers have experienced some toxicity levels in their cows. It is a prescription product, and a good relationship with the veterinarian is important. If you feel that you are in that area that may have high background levels of selenium, it's contact your veterinarian or even your animal health professionals as far as looking at doing some diagnostics to see what those cattle selenium levels are before we introduce a supplemental program. So that's important. Yeah.
Perfect. One of the next questions that we have is there a way to tell what the trace mineral status of my cow currently is?
Absolutely. And so it's to do diagnostics on animals. It assess their levels across a herd basis. It's done. It's performed by a veterinarian, and most often than not, if we're looking at selenium, blood or pool, but if we're looking at copper, zinc, and manganese, liver biopsies on standing cattle is the preferred method. And it will tell you, do it over a representative sample of the herd, and it's we're sampling the storage organ of this animal. So you're assessing their status in a group of cattle, and we match that to what stage of production they're in, and we also can, from that, we can dictate to see what their challenges is or what their status is. For example, if we sample animals after they've calved and they're low, that tells us that the maternal transfer pretty took a hit to them or they're deficient, and vice versa. If we biopsy animals before calving event and they're deficient or suboptimal, we know, and we can dictate or gather from that maternal transfer can have a negative impact on their level of post-calving. So yeah, biopsies are done, and it's also done too, not to necessarily affect but see deficiencies or suboptimal performance, but also look at the other extreme thing as well. So identify some over supplementation and to prevent any problems associated with that.
Absolutely. So we do have another great question. Question is from Joe. His question is, what is the dosage, and is there any tips when administering Multimin ID?
So the dosage, and it's always good to read the label, and I always do it in practice, even though I'm pretty sure I know what the label is. So it is age-based, and that is a very good question. So calves up to 1 year of age is 1 ml per 100 pounds. Cattle from 1 to 2 years of age is 1 ml per 150 pounds. Cattle over 2 years of age is 1 ml per 200 pounds of body weight. Okay, it is administered sub-Q. It is labeled for sub-Q use, and also to please follow BQA standards. And what was the second part of that question?
The second part is, do you have any tips when administering it?
So absolutely. So it's very syringeable. It's like water. So sub-Q use, put it below or the opposite side of other products. If we are going to administer the same side of products, put it below them. We don't want to have any inadvertent trickle down sub-Q and inadvertent mixing with other products.
Great information to have. So looks like we're getting all out of questions, Dr. Tracy. So we would like to thank you for joining us today and being part of today's Facebook Live. We hope that you learned something useful and that you can apply this to your operation. And please feel free to share with your friends. This video has been recorded, so you can certainly go back and view it on either our Facebook page, our website, or YouTube channel. If you're watching the recorded version and have a question, you can ask any questions in the comments section, and we will get those answered for you as soon as possible. There will also be a survey that will be posted in the comments below to help us better serve you and provide any suggestions for the future Facebook Lives. Next week's Have You Heard will be on Tuesday, October 13th instead of Thursday. Bear Hansen, our hoof trimming specialist, will be talking with 3 different hoof trimmers on our panel discussion. We'll see you next Tuesday on Have You Heard.